Hello, my name is Evan Fraser, and I work at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada. This is part of a series on how to feed the world's growing population. One of the most controversial aspects of the food system today is biotechnology. One type of biotechnology is called genetic modification, which is when scientists manipulate a plant or animal's DNA. This can happen in a number of ways. For instance, a scientist may move a gene from one species to another in order to give the original organism some special trait, such as the ability to withstand drought. Supporters think creating genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, is necessary to ensure our crops are productive and resilient enough to provide adequate food in the future. Others think GMOs are unleashing a maelstrom of social and environmental problems. Let's start with the arguments in favor of GMOs. Some scientists claim that GMOs will allow us to create new supercrops that will be 50% more productive than current ones, and that this is necessary to meet the demands of our growing population that will require about 70% more food by 2050. Critics disagree. One problem is that most GM varieties available today were not created to be more productive, or withstand drought, or use nutrients more efficiently, but were designed to be resistant to one particular herbicide called Roundup. Roundup-ready corn, cotton, and soy seeds are extremely popular with farmers, especially in North America, because they allow farmers to plant a field with this Roundup-ready seed and then spray the entire field with Roundup. This kills the weeds, but does not harm the crop. But Roundup has led to at least two problems. The first is that these seeds and sprays cost money, and poor farmers often go into debt to buy inputs like Roundup and GM seeds. But if these crops fail, poor farmers struggle to pay back their loans. In India alone, well over 100,000 farmers have committed suicide in the last 10 years because of such debts. So many critics point out that biotechnologies like Roundup-ready seeds benefit corporations more than they help farmers. A second problem is that Roundup has become so popular that weeds are developing a resistance to this spray. This is because in any weed population, a small number of individual plants may be resistant to the spray. By using Roundup too often, farmers kill off everything but those weeds that are immune. And in doing so, superweeds have evolved, becoming a major problem for farmers and ecosystems alike. Do these problems mean we should reject biotechnology entirely? I don't think so, but I do think we should always investigate whether low-tech solutions exist to problems before we start thinking about such high-tech strategies as moving genes between species. For instance, in large parts of the developing world, a lack of phosphorus in the soil limits rice yields. But in India, a traditional variety of rice called cassalath is able to grow without much phosphorus. In 2012, scientists figured out how cassalath's amazing ability works, and are now using a scientific method called marker-assisted plant breeding to move the gene responsible for this trait into other rice varieties. This illustrates the potential for biotechnologies that avoid many of the problems associated with GMOs. But there are other, even simpler stories about how science and technology can play a major role in feeding the future. Take the case of the geneticist Manish Raizada, who works at the University of Guelph and has spent part of his career using GM techniques to understand how plants function. Unlike a lot of plant geneticists, instead of starting in the lab, Manish begins his research by talking to farmers in the developing world to identify what they actually need. While working with farmers in Nepal with a local organization called Whiteboard, his team found that farmers traditionally plant grain by scattering handfuls of seed into the dirt. But by simply planting seeds in orderly rows, Manish's collaborators showed farmers they could increase yields by 25 to 40%. This is because evenly spaced seeds have equal access to soil nutrients, moisture, and sunlight. The team developed an elegantly simple toolkit to make it easy to plant in rows. 2 sticks and a string mark lines in the ground, and a hollowed-out stick drops one seed at a time into the prepared earth. It's the perfect marriage of science and locally appropriate technology. The moral of this story is that of the fly swatter versus the cruise missile. We should always look to see what fly swatters are at hand before we launch a cruise missile. If you're interested in learning more about this and other topics on Feeding 9 Billion, you can check out the other videos in this series. Also, my recent book, Empires of Food, goes into these topics in detail. And you can, of course, find me on Facebook and Twitter, where I regularly post news on global food security. Finally, if there's anything in this video that you want to follow up on, head over to www.feeding9billion.com, where I've posted all the scripts I've used in these videos, along with background references, and opened up an online discussion where you can weigh in with your own thoughts on anything you've just heard.